Dude, welcome to the podcast, bro.
Yeah, excited.
Congratulations. You just got called to be the new head coach at UVU for baseball, dude.
Yeah.
That's a big role.
Yeah.
When I got home from my mission, all I wanted to do was play baseball at UVU. And I had gotten into shape for about 6 months. And Nate Mathis, I'm sure you're very familiar with Nate. He's all over the program.
Yeah, he's our sports supervisor
He's
now.
one of the best humans you'll ever meet.
No doubt about
And he was the assistant coach at the time.
Yeah.
And just because of the close family relationship, I was going to be on the team.
Right.
And it was the year that we went from a 2-year to a 4-year school.
Gotcha.
So all these guys that would have been gone were going to get 2 more years, dude.
Yeah.
And I knew how good I was. I knew how good I wasn't.
Yeah.
And so I was going to end up riding the pine if maybe one day playing. And I decided to hang it up. But dude, what a cool position to be in, to be able to have that kind of influence over college kids.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts, Jeremy, to be honest with you. You know, as a local kid who grew up here, it's like, I never would have thought that this would have been something that was in my future if you'd have put me, 15 years ago. I always explain my playing career as I was a very okay baseball player, right? And so there's this uniqueness of getting into coaching and then where it takes you, and then to get to this point in my career. I mean, obviously I'm super excited, prepared, ready to go, but it's kind of a whirlwind, in terms of all that, and just to be here in the home state. I mean, the amount of people have come out of the woodworks, right, that you connect with. There was one thing when I came back as an assistant to get promoted to the head guy is, completely different type of window and world. So, but hey, I couldn't be more excited. I mean, Utah Valley, it's changed so much from when you were, trying to play for Nate, and then even when I was coming out of high school. I mean, it's just completely different university, the direction, the admin. It's kind of crazy.
So what's been the most overwhelming thing so far as a head baseball coach of a D1 school?
Yeah. That there's all these little things that get taken care of. You just don't A, know what they all are, and B, know who to talk to about all those little things. So it was like within 72 hours of taking the job, I probably had 25 emails that were like, hey, like, we do this for you, and this is how we've done it in the past. Do you want to keep doing this? And I had to start responding with like, hey, is this like I have to make this decision in 48 minutes, 48 hours, or 48 days, because I have to like start to figure out. And then when you don't have a staff, and I was the recruiting coordinator, right? And we had lost kind of our staff and through this process. And so in the era of the transfer portal, I was like, I had to like look in the mirror and go, all right, for the next 8 days, because that's when the transfer portal ended, like, I'm going to be a recruiting coordinator for the next 8 days. And then I'm going to be a head coach. And so I think that once we got to like day 13, 14, it started to be like, I remember distinctly being at my desk and I was like, oh, I need to do that. And I was like, that can be tomorrow's problem. And I like sat there for a second, was like, okay, that was incredible to get to that place, because it was just like an overwhelming amount of little things. Nothing that was like super drastic or super crazy. Just a lot of little stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically a CEO at that point, right? You're running a whole organization.
Yeah.
How many people total do you basically oversee at this point, not including the kids themselves, the 35 student athletes?
Right. You have all the support staff, and so then you have like your assistants, right? You have 3 assistants, and then we have a director of analytics, and then we have equipment guys who I don't oversee directly, but also, coincide with our schedule. All of those things that go into this entire thing. It's nuts, right? The amount of people that you have to like make sure know what you're doing, and your transitioning program, right? And you have different personality. Even though I was part of the program before, you just have different things that are going on. And so the keeping everyone up to date, I mean, that happened 3 times today where I was like, oh yeah, like I should have had that person on that email chain. And so now we're kind of doing the whole thing. But I feel like at this point, a month and a half in, I feel like I'm starting to get comfortable with just like who needs to be kept in the loop and when and why and what, and kind of moving forward off that.
I mean, you just want to coach your baseball team.
Yeah, if only, right? If only. So
it was probably nice being the recruiting coordinator, because at least you probably got to retain, you had relationships with all the kids. Was that super helpful in the transition?
There's 2 things that were huge during that process. The first thing was Utah Valley lasted about 48 hours from when it happened to hiring,
quick,
which allowed us to retain.
Old coach went to Washington?
He went to Washington. Yeah, he's from Washington, so it's kind of
big job.
Yeah, dream job for him. Came from LSU,
It's interesting because the Utah State coach, Danny Sprinkle, so I interviewed him on my podcast last year. He just took the Utah State job. Yeah. And he lasted less than a year and he bounced to Washington. It was kind of crazy, but
totally. Yeah. So he kind of got his dream job, and then from interview process to that. Now, I think that the guys, the uniqueness of, how Coach Smith had run his program was I was the main contact and main recruiter for majority of these guys. Mm-hmm. And so those relationships were super intact. A lot of those, they knew what we did on the pitching side, and they knew our head coach, and they had talked to him, but they had built those relationships, with me. And so there was a pretty overwhelming response from the guys, which I'm you never know, in those situations. And that was obviously incredible to get to that point, to hear that. And then for Utah Valley to move that fast was awesome. So we only lost one through the process, and we actually had a player who had gone in the transfer portal before come back. And so we kind of, broke even in that, which was, lucky in this day and age. That doesn't happen very often.
You got to start setting up relationships with all the local coaches. I mean, did you already had a lot of relationships, I'm guessing, because of your time when you were recruiting with UVU and then just as a player and everything else. And then obviously your dad knew everybody, right? That had to be a huge advantage, though, just because everyone knew who your dad was.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for sure. It's funny. Like most of the guys I played with growing up are now high school coaches too, right?
So, yeah. It's I remember even just when I was at Bingham coaching with your dad, there was 6 coaches that used to coach at Bingham that were all over the main, they were at Riverton and Copper Hills and Brighton and West Jordan and everywhere else.
No doubt. It's a Mountain Ridge's head coach who was my double play partner from 8 to 18, right? So it was coming back with that. I would say that coming back and then having some high schools, I just had no idea who they were. And I was just oh, who's this? And I was oh, they've won 4 state titles. They're pretty good. But it was definitely an advantage coming back, just knowing the high schools. I've worked in a few different states now, and that's a whole thing in itself, is figuring out who's good, who's going to shoot straight about players, all of those things, and then to have some built-in relationships with people was nice. And so none of that had to really happen through the head coaching stuff, right? I was the main talk with all those people as well. And the way of recruiting now is it's national, right? And so last year,
how many of your guys are in state versus out?
I think this year's our most amount of in-state since we've been here, and I think we have 9.
That's it?
Out of 40.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's not not trying to recruit Utah.
Sure, no.
It's just this is the way it is.
Well, there is something to be said, though. I mean, look, the state of Utah, we've produced maybe 4 dudes that have made it to the show in 20 years. And
it's a population thing.
Yes. They don't play year round. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it. Right. Football is a whole other story.
Totally. But when you deal with Utah with, it's 3.5 million people, and then you go to California with their 48 million people, it's for every good player there is in Utah, there's 48 of them over there. There's 40 of them over there that are playing year round, right? That are doing those things. And the advancement of social media now, there's just so much more connection.
I was going to ask you, so as a recruiting coordinator now, a head coach, how many kids, high school kids across the country, are you in touch with at a time that you're kind of looking at and at least keeping a relationship with?
It's a unique question because there's a ton of people you're following throughout the entire process. You have stipulations on when you can actually contact somebody, right? Not until their junior year. So I would say there's a huge list of freshmen and sophomores that you see, and you're okay, gotta follow that kid. And then that tends to dwindle down as you're getting into the junior year, and then you have your guys you call. So early on, you're calling probably 100, 150 kids right out the gates when you're talking to them. Doesn't mean that each one of those are that. You're trying to feel it out as a mid-major coach sometimes because there's good players everywhere, right? Our leadoff last year transferred to LSU, and he's probably going to be a first rounder. We had an incomer 2 years ago who was drafted for $1 million, but they came to us or were coming to us, right? So they're good players that could have played anywhere. But you don't know that going into August 1st.
In baseball, it's not like other sports where you're some schools I'm guessing UVU doesn't even recruit a lot of the best basketball players because they know they're not going to end up coming at UVU. Whereas baseball, it's absolutely a reality you could get those kids.
100%. How you view the game, how I view the game, completely different. What's going on with those, what I can fix, what you can fix, understanding those is a whole other thing, right? And so when you're dealing with that with recruiting, so it's I'll call somebody, I'm this guy will have 15 offers, and he's not talked to 0, right? And then this guy will be oh, he'll have 0 offers. I'm oh, he's talking to Georgia Tech and Georgia and all, and it's just holy cow. And so you can't go into recruiting and ever be oh, that guy's too good for us, because you don't know that everyone else saw him. It's just it's a different world. So
you're trusting your own gut a lot more than what you know more than you are the offers they have and things like that.
Oh, for sure.
Well, dude, when I played high school baseball, half the kids that had the best offers, we knew who was good. We played against them. Right. I'm that freaking guy? What are you talking about? And a lot of times it was honestly who their dad was connected to. Right. It really was. It was baseball more than any other sport. Basketball, you can't hide a kid. Baseball, and sometimes it's a little bit easier, but you go to a lot of the national showcases then? Is that where you're picking up a lot of this stuff?
So we recruit a lot of transfers in this day and age, and I think most schools are transitioning to that just because.
Well, that's the thing. It's a 24/7 recruiting. You have to recruit your own guys all the time.
100%. Yeah, retainment's a real deal.
Dude, I talked to Jimbo Fisher the other day. He was the head coach. I had him on my podcast, texting him. They had the number 1 or 2 recruiting classes 3 years in a row at A&M. Yeah. Dude, he said, I couldn't focus on the game plan because all I was doing was trying to keep my own damn players. Right. Everyone was recruiting them all day. And he had 13 guys on staff just to recruit other teams' players. Think about that for a second.
Right.
13 guys just to recruit other teams' players.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very real reality. And even when Jimbo was there, they couldn't transfer every year. Now they can transfer every year starting this year. So it becomes like a whole thing. I mean, it's an open market every year. And I think that, I mean, I definitely think there's ways to deal with this and how you go about it.
How do you go about it? Because I mean, if you're too hard on a kid, you might scare him off, right? And if you don't play a kid soon enough, even though he's not ready, he might, he's when I coached with your dad at Bingham, there was a catcher, I don't remember his name now, but he ended up transferring as a freshman to Jordan because they promised him he'd play as a freshman. And at Bingham, we said, look, you're probably not going to play till maybe your sophomore or junior year.
Right.
And he ended up being the best player in the state his senior year. He was that good.
Right.
I think they won the state tournament, and we probably would have won had he been at Bingham.
Of course.
But your dad and Coach Sato were just being honest with him and said, look, you're not going to play as a freshman. So he transferred. Like, you have to deal with stuff like that.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest, like I try to not think about it as much as other people probably fixate on it. I think that kids and humans want to be coached. They want structure. We crave it. I crave it, right? And I think the more we think about all the things that could go wrong, the more that's all we're focusing on, instead of trying to figure out what could be going right, how we coach this, how we teach that. Maybe it's my upbringing, right?
No, so you just coach them as if they're going to be there.
Yeah.
That's actually brilliant. I love that.
Right, because at the end of the day, I think that's what we end up having is kids are growing up in our program and they want to be a part of it, right? I think that there's a big reason that we didn't lose our entire roster throughout this entire process, right?
Well, there's people that I would say players want to keep score, right?
Yeah.
Like talent wants to be coached. They want to be disciplined. They want to be pushed. I've always gravitated to really tough men because I wanted to be the best version of myself. And I can tell when somebody's kissing my ass or not pushing me hard enough. My biggest regret of high school was we had a high school baseball coach that gave up on us. He quit. He didn't let us practice. He didn't do anything. And we had the most talented team going into our senior year. We were ranked number 1 preseason. We had 13 guys on my senior year play college ball, dude. Wow. Like Stanford, Utah, Dixie. I mean, Dartmouth. Like we had a real team, you know. And this is like friggin' at Murray, 4A baseball, dude. We could have dominated, but we had a coach that just didn't push anyone.
Right.
And I hated it. So we'd all try to do it ourselves. Like 7 of us had batting cages in our backyards. I mean, we were a committed team, but ultimately we ended up underachieving because of that. And so for me, even when I started coaching at Bingham, so I started coaching in 2000, let me think, it was 2008 was my first year there. Because what was your last year, 07?
No, 8. You would have been.
So I was 09.
09, yeah.
So that was my first year. It was the year after you guys. You lost at Timpanogos, I think, in the finals. Because the way I picked where I was going to go coach is I just saw who made the finals the year before, and I called those coaches. That's what I did.
Yeah, 2 good coaches to call right
that's
there.
how I ended up in a good school.
Sato,
I didn't want to coach all year and not make the state tournament or not have a chance of winning it. So, dude, I'll never forget. I don't know if you know this. My first day showing up, because I played at Bingham, dude. We had 2 coaches and another part-time guy, and we practiced maybe twice a week. And then you played in games.
Right.
Never saw the field on a Saturday. Dude, I go in to talk to Coach Sato, and I just was like, wanted to coach. And I was basically the 10th coach on the staff. Yeah. Like, it was ridiculous. And then, there's like, all right, we'll see you Saturday morning at 7 a.m. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, Saturday at 7? What And I'll never forget the first time I met your dad, dude. I walked in, Rand, and I had my hat all crooked and shit, and just had my little, I looked like a total idiot, I'm sure. And first thing he said to me was just, fix your damn hat. And I was like, oh, we're not at Murray anymore.
No.
And I ended up when he passed away of cancer a few years ago, I wrote a little story about that because it was very impactful on me.
No doubt. Imagine a childhood of that.
Well, it's probably why you've been able to move up so quickly in the coaching ranks. I mean, it's been really cool. I mean, how old are you now? 20, 30?
34.
34.
Yeah.
And so you've been coaching, what, 12 years, 10 years?
12 years, yeah. This is year 12.
And you started out in Oregon, correct?
Started out in Oregon. Yeah, I worked at, I started my coaching career out in Washington. I played in Oregon at Pacific University, and then went up and coached at the University of Puget Sound for a year, which, funny enough, set up like a lot of what has happened in my coaching career, because there was 2 other assistants on that staff, and there was Craig Driver, who's currently the catching coordinator for the Dodgers, was in the big league staff with the Cubs for the last couple of years before this year, and then Kainoa Correa, who was with the Giants, is now with the Guardians, and so we were just some young guys that were just yelling at each other.
Happened to be 3 really talented dudes.
Yeah, they were just really average at baseball that ended up at the University of Puget Sound yelling about what we thought we knew, right? And I'm so thankful. I was only there for 10 months, but I mean, it was like 10 months of just straight up me and Kai pretty much just, going to practice and then yelling at each other for like 4 hours that night about everything we thought we knew. Some of it we were both right and wrong on, right? And so then I went back to Pacific. They offered a full-time job when I was 23 and somehow got it, which was a unique scenario because our head coach was announcing retirement. He had Parkinson's. And so but he was going to coach one more year. So I was pretty much like the only buddy in the industry that could manage like what was going on with him as a former player who was also coaching to kind of go the next direction. So I kind of like fell into a full-time job at 23 years old. It was really lucky.
So because of his health, were you taking on extra responsibilities you never would have otherwise?
Totally.
Yeah.
And so, and then the uniqueness of what happened was he retires, and that coach from Puget Sound who had hired me goes and takes the Pacific job. So like I end up in a really good scenario where I was working for the guy that gave me my first job. And he's hired a lot of guys that have gone on to some pretty incredible things. And so
just has an eye for talent or what?
Yeah, I don't know. That's think
pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of big league coaches that have run through like that University of Puget Sound, Pacific University. Actually, our new pitching coach worked for him. And so it's just funny how some of those things work out. And so I went there for 3 years, and we had a pretty big turnaround there. You know, when I went back, because he had announced retirement, we only had 26 players on our team. We only had 9 pitchers on our team. We won, I think, 9 games that year. And then 2 years later, we had our most wins in school history, #1 offense in the country, drafted position player in Division III, which is very unique in that scenario or in that time. And then I had to make like the tough decision, right? I wanted to jump into Division I baseball at that time.
Sure.
It's funny. The goal was I just wanted to be a Division III head coach. That was all.
That was
I wanted.
like the max you could.
That's all I could like conceive that I could do.
Funny how we do that, right? Like our mind, like we made vision boards once when I was like 15 years ago when we first started out in real estate, and I remember my brother made this vision board, and dude, it had like. I swear it was like a Lexus. It was like a car that's just pretty basic though. Right. I mean, if we're being honest, if it's on your vision board, your dream car, and a house that honest to God is half the size of the one he lives in today. Yeah. And, you know, it was like, I remember there was like a beach. He was like one day wanted to take his family on a trip. They go on a trip every like 3 months. Right. But it's just funny how like we grow into these things.
Put yourself in a bottle.
But at the time, that's the biggest your mind could get you to go.
Yeah. I'd done a huge data dive in like 2014 and learned that like every Division III head coach had either been promoted from within or had been a Division I coach that had come back that were West jobs. And my head coach was like 8 years older than me. So I was like, okay, do I want to be the head coach when I'm 57 years old and he retires, right? Or do I want to, what do I have to do? And so in that time, it was I needed to go to Division I baseball if I wanted to come back and be a division. Getting in Division I baseball was like one of the hardest things in the world at the time to do because you're a Division III coach, which is funny. I've never learned more about recruiting than working in Division III with the amount of money that you get dealt with no scholarships. And
I was going to say, like, just to give people an idea, when you were a full-time coach, assistant coach in a Division III school, how much you making a year?
I think I made $35,000.
So you're really doing it for the love of the game.
Yeah, no doubt. I think I brought in like $2.7 million for the program, or for the school with the players we recruited. With how expensive it is for Division III, I made $35,000. So, but yeah, I mean, this is what I wanted to do with my life, right? And so that's what you do. And so I left a full-time job. My wife to be at the time left a full-time job, and we moved to Northern Colorado because Kai, who works with the Guardians now, he was at Northern Colorado, and that doesn't happen if Brian Billings doesn't go and take the Pacific job, because now Kai goes and searches and finds
whole things.
Right. And so it's this unique like stumble upon of if I don't get the Pacific job and then I have the in and Billings came and then he goes to there, like I never end up in Northern Colorado. And so we were there for 3 years, really tough scenario. You know, I have a lot of love for that place. We only had 3 scholarships there and we won 30 games, which not a lot of programs.
What city is that in?
Greeley, Colorado.
I've never even heard.
Yeah. It's about an hour north of the airport. And there's something about doing something special with nothing.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
Oh, yeah. It means awesome. So much. Well, dude, it's like being an Indians fan.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, right now we're tied for the best record in baseball, and we have the 27th payroll, I think. So it's like the team means so much more to me right now. I'm like, come on, baby. Yeah. Anyway, it's true though. It's like when you don't have as much to work with, it does mean a lot more.
I think we had $6,000 in the starting lineup, and we scored the 17th most runs in the country. And to do that, there was just this huge amount of pride from our players too. And we were very vocal to our players about the situation they were in and what we had to do to like overcome those things, which I think again became this sense of like we're beating people with things that we shouldn't be beating them with. Which was really cool. And so that eventually led to me getting a professional job for the Minnesota Twins was that. And I went to rookie ball for a year, and then I was in high A for a couple of years.
Did you coach any of their up-and-comer dudes like Royce Lewis or any of those dudes?
So Royce had just left rookie ball when I got hired. Okay. A lot of the guys that I had are playing in different organizations, like Akil Baddoo, who plays for the Tigers, Spencer Steer, who plays for the Reds. Those are probably the 2 main guys that I ended up with. I had a bunch of the young guys too. But I think there was like 6 hitters that are in the big leagues now, or at least have got up there. I mean, I had pro ball's so weird because there's such a difference in like, you kind of coach everybody.
It's and if you don't understand it, it's just like they're basically, it's the whole thing is like there's some key people that they're trying to figure out. Right. The rest of the guys, they need someone to play against them.
And you have them for like this amount of time and they should be moving up. And so it's like, who's actually so I coached a lot of the players, right? Like I know.
When you were coaching for the Twins, are they telling you like how much are they directing you, who's playing and how much and stuff like that?
Yeah, every day.
That's what I thought. They're telling you who to play. You're just coaching them.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where like I could never be a manager at that level because you're kind of handcuffed on what you can and can't do. But being a hitting guy, I mean, it was pretty awesome working with Akil Baddoo and Spencer Steer every day. And I know they haven't become all-stars yet, but they are pretty incredible humans that came from very different backgrounds that worked in very different ways. And it teaches you a lot. It also helped me like come back to college because in college before, you tried not to mess up, in my opinion, we tried not to mess up our best players. And then I went and worked with them and it was like, are they going to be a big leaguer or are they not? And if they're not like directly 100% gospel, you can say they're going to be a big leaguer. You can do whatever. And Spencer and Akil at certain points, we're talking Akil Baddoo didn't play AA baseball or AAA baseball before he played in the big leagues. And he wasn't on a big league trajectory when I had him. So there was a lot of work to be had. And so that part was so awesome because now I've come back to college baseball and it's like, no. Are these guys big leaguers or not? Right. That's the mindset. And so everyone has something they can get better on. And I think that's, really helped me in terms of player development.
Yeah. And just not being afraid of trusting yourself 100%. And what you can teach them. Right. Yeah. How come you went just curious. I mean, your dad was a coach for 30 years, 29?
Yeah, I mean, a long time.
30, you can call it 30 years, both women's basketball and baseball, but he stayed in high school the whole time. Actually, ironically, stayed as an assistant in baseball the whole time. Yeah. Never wanted to be the head guy or whatever. Yeah. He didn't want to move and do that.
He definitely didn't want to leave Bingham.
Exactly. Yeah. How come you didn't go the high school route?
I think the easy way is the way I always explain it is my dad would be like, oh man, once they become seniors, it's so great. And I'd always be like, man, the guys that you think are smart, I think are really, really need to get better. Right. So I knew that I didn't want to teach. Like that's never been something that's been like a passion that I want to be in the classroom and do that. I think my dad, as much as he's known for coaching, like he did love teaching. Like he did love being in the classroom and doing those things as well. I think that
you just want to be a baseball coach.
Yeah, I just wanted to coach baseball. I also didn't want to just be dealt the hand. Like I wanted to have a hand in who I
That's a good point. I didn't think about that in high school. If you just don't have the talent, you don't have the talent.
Right.
Like, what do you do? I guess nowadays you can recruit a little bit, but still, that's pretty tough.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was never like in the mindset. I think that there was always this like, oh, if this doesn't work, at the start. When I say the start, probably for about 48 minutes. And then it was like, no, this is going to work. Right. Like I'm a pretty confident person and like, this is what I'm going to do with my life. And so,
did your dad give you any advice as far as where to go or what route to take?
No, I mean, he didn't coach in college. Right. So I think that there's some uniqueness there. Is like, I don't know if he had like the answers for me to talk through. He's definitely gave me advice as like time has gone on. I think it's always interesting when you work in the same profession as your father and you end up going separate ways in certain aspects.
Yeah, right? Separate ways, and one would argue a higher level of doing the same thing.
Yep. And so there was some like uniqueness as time had went on where it became like, okay, like this. And then I remember towards like the end, the last couple of years of his life, like I remember having a conversation where like he had a legal pad out. Right. And that was unique to me.
Dude, I always get emotional when I, think about those times, but he would talk about you, man, with so much pride. Yeah. And he was so like, he respected you from day one. He didn't think you needed to learn from him as a coach or anything else. He talked about how great you were doing and he just bragged about you all the time, man. Yeah. It was cool to listen to it.
Yeah. It's crazy how many people tell me that too. Right. It's, I had a unique childhood because I mean, a lot of people, I had a tough childhood growing up with my dad. Like,
what was your work? Because your dad could be the biggest ass I've ever met in my life. That's probably why I loved him because I can handle that, right? Totally. Our relationship started very rocky. Right. We hated each other, right? And we both ended up becoming, very close. This beautiful respect for each other that had to be earned on both ends. Totally. But yeah, man, I had a couple moments with your dad where I was like,
yeah. Well, imagine driving to school. Imagine driving to school, going to practice, not having a good day, getting told the entire way back about not having a good day. I mean, it really took for me going to college for me and my father to have an actual relationship.
Really?
Which is unique to say now,
Did he change though? Was there like you've earned the respect kind of thing? Because
I think my mom helped. Oh, yeah. I think there was a little bit of like, do you want him to come home at Christmas kind of thing, But I will say this, like he did a really good job of going from coach to dad at that point. And that's kind of what I needed at that point in my life. I'm living, multiple states over at that point. And so it's unique. You grow up with this within our circles and within our community, like a very well-known person, face, all those things. I was Rand's son. And I think part of that,
telling you how great your dad is. You're over here like, he's kind of addictive.
Yeah. But like in some great ways, right? I look back and like, I wouldn't change any of that. I wouldn't, necessarily do it that way. I will say this, he was the most consistent person I've ever been around.
It's actually worth something though.
Yeah.
That's valuable, dude. Because at least you can know what to expect.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I knew exactly if I did that, this was the consequence. Now there's times I was willing to do that for that consequence in that moment. But I learned a lot of life lessons of just about how to be present, how to be, I'm terrified of being late anywhere still because of my dad, right? Yeah. Like you don't show up late.
I think those were little things that your dad really respected out of me. He could, I was very much like an adult when it came to like being on time. Like when you're a realtor, you show up late for a listing appointment or to show a house, you're going to lose the client. Yeah. You just lost a $20,000 commission because your ass couldn't get there on time.
100%.
It's like, you can ask Dakota. You've been watching me do calls and podcasts probably 500 different times. How many times have I been late, Dakota? It doesn't happen.
There's probably a very
something
big reason
really
for
bad happened if I'm late,
Exactly. And so that was the uniqueness of growing up with him. It happened like last week, 2 weeks ago. I got hired as the head coach. What is that? 6 weeks ago now? It's hard. Time stuff right now. And somebody that works in our admin was like, so Kathy Nixon, who's our SWA at UVU, who coached women's basketball at Utah Valley. So she knew my father. When I first got hired, she gave me a hug, and I didn't know who she was. Right, that was the first thing she did. She's like, I knew your dad, blah, blah, blah. And then, and so she comes in and gives me a hug. I'm sitting in with this person, and she's like, "Wait, you're Rand's son." And like we'd worked together for 2 years, right? And she just put that together, and that was like the most amazing thing. And I totally see it now, and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah. But that was tough, right? It took, until I left, it was the first time where I wasn't Rand's son, right? Like,
kind of finally had your own identity,
I wanted to be Nate Rasmussen, baseball player, not Nate Rasmussen, Rand's son who plays baseball, right? And that was a lot of, that has nothing to do with him.
No, that's just the reality of that situation.
Yeah, that's just what happened.
You talk to anybody who has a famous dad or mom, that's just part of the situation.
And my father, he's not a quiet, face. He's a very loud face. And so everybody knew him, whether they loved him or hated him. Everyone knew him. And so I think that there was just some fight back that really wasn't on him at all. It was more on me just trying to be my own self, right? And so I think when I got into coaching in college, that was the uniqueness, is no one really knew who my dad was, right?
And so they didn't care if they did.
So I never had that. I never had to like prove myself that way. It was all about what I can do, and I loved that, right? And so I think that's probably why I never really thought about going to high school, was just,
you didn't want to be the shadow of your dad, or like people even saying like, did you get this because of your dad or whatever, Yeah, it's a good point. Be your own guy. I didn't really think about that.
Totally. Shoot.
Well, so you end up in Northern Colorado, and then how'd you end up back in Utah?
So I'm working for the Twins, and to be honest with you, I'm working for the Twins, and I had started during COVID at like an online hitting business, and it was doing very well. And I was actually really sick of working in professional baseball at the time. Love the players. There's a very big.
What makes it difficult to work in professional baseball?
There's a lot of initiatives that, if you're not directly on the same mindset as that initiative, it can get a little rocky. And I've never been one that's going to do something that somebody else tells me is right. I'm going to talk about why I think that's not right, and we're going to work through it. And that wasn't necessarily like loved.
They weren't looking for that.
Yeah, they were looking for, hey, you're the high A hitting coach, be the high A hitting coach and do these initiatives. And I was like, well, that's going to make that guy worse, and here's why. And they're like, we don't care, make that guy worse. And I was like, all right, sweet. And so I kind of got over that. So my wife and I were like, hey, like we're in Florida. My wife likes her job. I have this online hitting thing that's going, and it's doing great. And I'm like, okay, maybe this is what I'm going to do. And so we bought a house, and we closed on the house. And then 11 days later, Coach Smith calls me, and he goes, hey, I'm interviewing for some jobs. Are you interested in coming back to college baseball? And I'm like, yeah, because we had talked about that. And, I am interested, where, and there's 25 jobs open. And like, no way that
across the whole country.
Yeah. I never thought it was going to be, Utah Valley, of all places. And so we ended up owning our house for 53 days during COVID. So
did it go up a bunch?
A lot. A lot. So
good for you.
Yeah. So it went okay with that venture. But the biggest part, my wife was 8 months pregnant. And so we had to like get to Utah, and we had the kid, we had Reggie, she was like 12 days later, something like that. So it was like, but yeah, that's kind of how it worked. I just was looking back. I missed winning to be honest. I love, like, winning is like such a big thing that we don't think about.
Well, that was like, I joked about that, about like wanting to go to a school that was going to be playing for something, but like there is just like when you're coaching, it's really hard. It's really long days and there's a lot of bullshit you put up with. And so it's like, you do need the reward a little bit.
Right.
You know, I need it with the life coaching, dude. Like, you know, that's kind of what I do essentially now, but it's like, I need the text messages where the kid's son starts talking to the dad again, or where the dude worked through a fight with his daughter, you know, because of the skills that he learned and things. Like you need those things because you need the wins and that's like in baseball. You need to go win some games. Like you gotta get something.
Shoot, I played in college where we had 2 years where we, you know, came in fifth or less, and we didn't win as many games as we lost. And then I was part of a first conference championship. And if you're going to talk to me about, like, you know, having a good college experience, it was winning a lot of baseball games because, dang, that felt good, right? So I think that those things you don't get that in professional baseball. What you get is like, that didn't matter. It didn't matter that we won 3-2 tonight if, like, you know, prospect A, B, and C are doing things that aren't, you know, getting them to the
that's
big
why
leagues.
I can't get into AAA even baseball is because the outcome doesn't matter.
They don't care.
Any sport where the outcome doesn't matter, I can't get into it. I can get into the Olympics.
Totally.
You know? I can get into freaking high diving. I don't care as long as people care if they win.
No doubt.
The second people don't care, I'm just like, well, I don't. That's why the Jazz have been so insufferable to watch the last few years. They don't care if they win.
Right.
The outcome of the game does not matter. So I'm like, well, if I don't honestly give a shit if they won or lost, like I'm probably going to be entertained watching it. I'm too competitive for that.
Totally. And that was my experience in professional baseball was just, you know, you have 152 of these where you're just going out there and it's like, all right, like, you know, we got beat. And that even happens in the big leagues too. Cause like you're going to lose 60 games, right? You're going to win 60 games. Sure. It's what's going on in the other ones. And so it's like, you know, you get crushed in one game. It's like, yeah, that's why we play 162 of them. And it's like, yeah, but that was really hard when the wins for minor leagues, hey, it's all about the prospect. It's all about how he's doing. And yeah, that's great. But like, there's something to be said about like grounding out to second base and your team won and you're coming out of a slump because the win mattered. Where in pro ball, you can't do that. It's like that guy's got to get a hit. That guy's got to hit a ball hard for him to come out of this because he can't get him back by like grounding out and winning the baseball game today. Like, and that's what I love about college is like you can be in the worst place mentally ever, but you win the ball game.
Win that game.
Everything's going to be okay. Like you're going to eat dinner okay. You're going to smile on the bus maybe a little bit, right? And because you're with your boys and you're with everything, and so
it's a lot of pressure on the prospects too, because like winning doesn't matter. It's just, I mean, it's so individualized. It's everything's honestly becomes selfish.
Totally.
Like it doesn't really matter about the team.
Right. And that's why, you know, it's about 15, 20 years ago when they started incentivizing, you know, playoff wins and how far you went and those types of things.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
For the minor leagues?
No, for the major.
Sorry.
I mean, that's when that like really started to shift for that. There was major leaguers 20 years ago that didn't care about winning major league games because nothing was incentivized. Yeah. I think it was Adam Dunn that said like, you know, hey, the moment they started paying me to like win playoff games is the moment I started caring whether I wanted to play longer or not to see my family, right? And so, you know, and I could be quoting the wrong person.
No, but it's true. You don't think about that though, right? It's like, well, it's like an NBA player, you know, they play a third of the season in the playoffs if they win at all.
Right.
Like that's a lot of extra games that they don't get paid for, but your salary is going to be determined upon how you did in the playoffs. So it's like, but yeah, that's a good point.
You want them to care about the preseason or the mid-season tournament? You know, give them $1 million if they win it. Of course they care about it. All of a sudden they played hard. You know, some of those guys, that's more of their salary.
Of course.
And that's the thing about college baseball is like, let's, you know, break it down realistically. A lot of the kids that we're coaching, I mean, we've had 10 professionals in 3 years at Utah Valley here since I've gotten here. And that doesn't include an incomer who signed for $1 million to the Astros. And that's like an alarming amount. That's still, less than 10% of the players we've coached, right? Less than 5% of the players we've coached. And that's how hard it is, right, to do that.
Well, another cool thing about being a college coach, though, is like, yes, you get the reward of winning or losing games, but you also do get the win of like developing the kids on like a personal level. These are the most fundamental years of these dudes' lives, you know, 18 to 24 basically in Utah because of missions and things like that.
Yep.
And to be able to have the opportunity to just be a mentor for them and be somebody that they can look up to and get advice from and things like that. That's huge, man.
No doubt. I mean, it's a big deal. And you know, going back to things like, you know, you learn life lessons from my father, right? You've done it. I've done it. You know, I was taught to be like even keel, no matter what, right? Opponent never knows where you're at. Mm-hmm. And through that process, like you could have looked at me playing and been like, oh, it's awesome. Raz is the same guy every day. Except for one day I'm broken inside, like completely broken. And the next day I'm angry. And the next day I'm happy as can be. And you can't see the difference in me because that's like the thing that like I love about coaching, right? Is you can't just assume because that guy is this every day that he's actually this every day, right? It's getting to know them on a deeper level and having them, you know, vulnerability is lost in coaching, right? And so getting people to open up and feel comfortable with that so that we can get to a deeper spot so that I can understand you more, so we can understand each other more. And I think that forever in our sport, for sure, coaches weren't vulnerable with their players as much as like it can be done today, which is really awesome. That's the cool part about coaching in 2024 is like having a real talk with somebody and being able to share like, hey man, I go through this. Like, let's talk about it. Like, I'm going to have a bad day and you're having a bad day. And let's figure out how we get to the spots that are going to be over here. Doesn't mean that bad day's not coming tomorrow too, right? And so I think that those are the things that, you know, it's honestly why I do this. Winning I love, but I love winning with people that we've broken through barriers with, right? And how we've, you know, made their life better. And that I get directly from my father, right? The amount of specifically female basketball players that were like, hey, your dad did this for me. We're recruiting a player right now that my dad coached, mom, right? And we've talked at length at times about like those like life lessons. And it's like, yeah, no, that's why we're doing this. Like at the end of the day, he's probably not going to be a big leaguer because most aren't. Doesn't mean don't try to be, right? But we can grow him up to be a really, really good like dad, father, you know, husband, all those things that are going to be really, really helpful for society and hopefully affect a lot of people too.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most rewarding things you can do, man. It's so commendable. And I mean, it's like, that's one of the dream jobs I would have. A head baseball coach at UVU. That's about as good as it gets, dude.
Oh, you're telling me, man.
From a life standpoint, that's about as good as it gets.
Yeah.
It's freaking amazing, man.
No, that's cool.
Well, what are you most looking forward to as the head coach now, dude?
I don't know if there's anything like necessarily different than what I've been doing that I'm like necessarily like looking forward to. It's like, oh, you're gonna write the lineup. It's like, okay, like that's cool, you know. And yeah, I got to make some big decisions, and I'm the one talking to the umpire and stuff. You know, I don't think that I go to bed at night and I'm like, oh man, if I would have argued that call, you know, we would have got it right. I think that it's the continuation that the work we're putting in, the success that we're having is going to continue to build, and the new challenge, right? I think the new challenge is probably the thing I'm looking forward to the most. You know, I was talking to our newcomers last week, and I, you know, broke down from, you know, what Utah Valley was before. I don't even know if you know this, but in 2021, Utah Valley went 10-47, which was the worst record in Division I baseball. And actually from 17 to 21 had the most amount of losses in the country.
I didn't realize it was that bad.
Yeah. And then 2 years later, we had the biggest turnaround, almost 35 years of Division I baseball. And like I said, 10 professionals, not including the incomer, highest draft pick in school history, freshman All-American, best offense in the WAC last year in almost 15 years, first 100 homer WAC team in 15 years.
Hold your own very well against BYU and Utah too, having the last few years.
Yeah, Utah was a very good team last year. We had kind of taken it to them the year before. They kind of took it to us last year, and BYU and us have split the last 2 years. And so for two Big 12 teams, you know, I think that's speaking to like the program and how we're getting to, which is awesome. You guys can actually win the whole thing if you just win enough games, right? You can get into the NCAA tournament 100%.
from your position.
Yeah, definitely. So, so it's really, really cool kind of what we've built to this point. You know, if you'd have told me it was going to happen that fast, I would have called you crazy. But I also understand that like the work that went in, you know, to get it to that point. So I'm talking to the newcomers on Thursday and I'm saying, hey, you know, this is what it was. This is what it's done since then. And now we have 12 returners, right? So this is what you're up against. But guess what? I'm also up against it because I'm a first-time head coach. Like I have to prove myself, right, every day. You know, we have a staff full of new guys, right? They have never worked here. They have to prove themselves every day, right? So we're in this together, but this is what we're up against. This is what we're up against maintaining. This needs to be, you know, at our forefront or at our foresight going into every single practice that we go into. And so I think that that's the coolness, is just the challenge, right? And I'm a person that loves challenge. Like I want that in my life. You know, I think that there's some excitement and challenge. I think that's what I struggle with in pro ball, right? What was the challenge necessarily? What were we trying to accomplish every single day? And all of a sudden I was starting to get bored. And then I was like, I don't really like coaching, right? Or now it's like, okay, another challenge, let's go, you know? And we still, as good as we've been, I've watched somebody dogpile during that game, right? Watched Sam Houston State dogpile against us 2 years ago in the championship game, right? And so it's getting to the point where somebody else gets to watch us stockpile, right? That's the hope and challenge that's in front of us.
Beautiful. What's a couple of your philosophies as a coach, or what are a couple of the things that you really emphasize that you think is the most important to have a successful team?
Holistically?
Just in general, I guess.
Yeah. I think that, you know, just tale as old as time, like work wins, like every single day, focus, it wins. Like You can't have a bad September 10th through September 21st and expect that you're going to win a championship come May. Like, if you can't have that focus at that time, there's no way you're going to be able to just turn it on. I've been around a lot of teams at this point, a lot of individuals, and the guys that usually procrastinate in September usually procrastinate when we get to May and usually go through yips and those things. So the biggest thing is like, how do we build a culture of like today, this pitch, this moment, most important thing in my entire career. Because nothing tomorrow or nothing yesterday, it's all fake, right? It's all what we live in currently. And so that's like the biggest focus that we have. And it's really hard in our sport, right? Because it takes a lot of reps and a lot of changes to fix things. So sometimes you don't feel like you're progressing and you have to be dialed and you have to be attention to detail, because I'm a firm believer that you're always creating a habit, good or bad, right? No matter what you do, every decision you make, because you're just 2 of those decisions away from creating bad habits and 2 of those decisions away from creating good habits. And so it's creating a culture where like, that's all we're focused on is like the work at hand and what we do today. Some of that being really, really fun, very specific, external, internal, there's different ways to go about it, but it needs to have a focus, right? We just did a coaches retreat where we met for 8 hours and we talked about like, hey, what do we want to learn today in each one of our specific groups, right? Like, what do we want to learn this year? Like, what do we want to lead the conference in? What do we want to learn that we can change and affect? And how are we going to track it every single day? And how is that going to be our focus? Mainly to be like, hey, when we're doing an outfield drill, like, hey, we're doing it with outfielders and we're doing this, I'm like, cool, how's this affecting our initiative, right? Like, how is that keeping us dialed into creating the best rangy outfielder or whatever the case may be for whatever your goals are? So I think it's establishing like realistic goals that we can track, carry, and then get our players to buy into like why they're doing things and focused in on that work. So, I'm addicted to that process. I've been told before by multiple coaches, like, you're never nervous in the game. I'm like, well, if I'm nervous in the game, that means we didn't prep very well, because we play baseball. Like, it's going to be a couple of these and making sure I don't put the hit and run on the wrong time, right? But very rarely, like, we play baseball. Like, it's going to come down to the players, and all we have to worry about is the preparation to get there. And
yeah, I talked to a lot of, Hall of Fame athletes, things like that. I've had, 40, 50 on my podcast now, and they all say the same thing, that it's just like, it's just the reps.
Yeah.
It's just, you do something enough times until it feels easy. I mean, you see there's the movie where the dude's climbing El Capitan, solo or whatever it was called. Yeah. And the dude he had done each of those reps without falling, where the penalty wasn't falling to his death so many times that he was able to do that without his heartbeat going up.
Right. No doubt. No doubt. It's incredible, right? It's coming up in like every day,
it really is.
In everyday life with everything that we do. And so, and I think that it starts at the top, me making sure that I'm held to that accountability, right? And then making sure that our coaches are doing the same thing, so that when we get to those moments where we have to be really, really impactful, that we feel like we've taken care of our stuff, to make sure that they're taking care of that stuff in that time. And it's great. I think that's been a big turning point. We have an unbelievable strength coach here who's, we've had 35 guys here for 6 weeks already, which is very unique to the country. We have 2 power forward transfers that are coming in this year, and both of them are like, this is different. I'm like, yeah, I'm not saying that we have the talent of Oklahoma out here. What I am saying is the work so far is on caliber with what needs to do.
Those teams are the funnest to watch, man. You can tell when a team knows they've put the effort. That's how Utah football rose, though. They always outworked like the BYUs. It was like BYU would be favored by 10 every game, and Utah would win because they just cared more and they had that grit. You can't teach that. A kid either wants it more or he doesn't, And so, dude, I'm super pumped that you got the job, because I love watching baseball, and I have the perfect excuse to go watch a ton of games this year, dude. So
I know you've thrown out some cool first pitches, but we got to get you over.
Oh, I'd love to, dude. The old alma mater, bro.
100%. So,
dude, I'm in. If you ever need someone to come talk to the team or something too, like me, and I can get you some other ones, and I would love to have that opportunity, dude.
Absolutely.
And, can people donate directly to the baseball program, or they have to donate to the athletic department?
So they can directly donate to the program. There is if you go to gouvu.com, there's a donate tab, which has a drop down directly for baseball. And so you can click that tab, and all that money goes directly to the baseball program, which is awesome. You can allocate which program you want it to go to.
Sweet. I love that. Okay. Good to know.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I'm pumped to watch you this year. Congrats on the success,
Thank
man.
You.
And
you too, man.
Yeah. Thank you, dude.
Like you said, long overdue, and I'm excited.
It is, man. Now it was fun. Your dad really played such a big role in my life and allowed me to really grow up at a time that I needed that. And so it means a lot. And I've been cheering hard for you all along. And so, yeah, man, it's cool.
I'm just trying to do it for the next Jimmy Rex, right?
Exactly.
If I can build down that legacy, I'll be in a good spot.
Awesome, man. Thanks, Nate.
Yeah, thank you.